Excited to introduce this panel. These are women that actually I met. Monica used to be a member of Jubilee, and oh gosh, I think it was about 10 years ago that you helped. Your company at the time was Mona Lisa Productions. Was that 20 years? No, it couldn't have been 20. 15. So 15 years ago. How many people remember the fashion show that we did Through the Ages? Remember that? A few of us remember that. So her company helped us with that and helped us with the women's conference back then. And so it's been really awesome to be reintroduced to Monica through social media. And I met Nicole at a women's conference down the Cape and learned of her story, and then, you know, was able to follow her in her, I'll call her life adventures online. And actually today's the first day that Latrelle and I actually met face to face. But another woman that I follow on social media that inspires me, encourages me, and is just I love your story. And Alicia, I had the pleasure of meeting online as well. These are my online friends. And so I met Alicia and joined her for one of her conferences, and she's been an absolute blessing. I love her, the ministry that she does. So you'll hear from all of them, and Monica will be moderating. We also have Taisha Crayton, who is probably caught in traffic. She works for the governor's office, so when she gets here, she'll just, you know, join up on stage. So without further ado, introduce the panel. Let's give a round of applause to them.
I finally have my Oprah moment. Good evening, or good afternoon. Good evening. Yeah, it's 5 o'clock. It's evening. I am so incredibly happy to be here. The place looks amazing, and that's a round of applause to Pastor Mona and her team for the execution of this event. I'm excited to talk to the women here this evening as well. While we've had some preliminary conversations, I actually don't know all the answers to the questions that I'm gonna ask, so I'm gonna be sitting here just like you, like, what? No kidding. Girl, that's amazing. So before we get started, what I'd like to do is have each of them introduce themselves. Oh, well, let me introduce myself. My name is Monica Cost, and I run a consulting firm that does pathfinding, and my journey is one of ebbs and flows. And like I told Alicia, it's very quilted. It is not a straight line. I was in corporate America. I ended up starting my company, ran it part-time for many years, flew the coop from corporate America in 2010. Didn't look back, but it hasn't always been easy, and so we'll talk about that. So if I could just have, start with Nicole, if you could introduce yourself and give us 2 minutes of your journey.
Sure. My name's Nicole Peterkin. I go by Nikki. I am a financial planner. I own a practice. I've been in business for about 6 years. I'm also an author and speaker. My journey is one that's also had many twists and turns. I was pre-med at BU, thought that I was going to be a surgeon. My dad passed away, and in my dad passing away, I realized that, you know, family and lifestyle should be at the forefront of your planning, and your money should facilitate those things that are important to you, and not necessarily having a focus, instead of having a focus on, you know, money for the sake of money. You know, sometimes you're like working so hard to provide for your family, you're working so hard to like take care of yourself and advance your career, and you forget that the things that are most important are what should be at the forefront even as you progress in those goals. So the focus of my practice and of my book and of most of my speaking engagements is like, how do you get your money to work for you and creating the lifestyle that you need, while also, you know, being conscious of planning for the future and not having money as the ultimate goal. So happy to be here.
Thank you. Latrelle?
Good afternoon, ladies. My name is Latrelle Chase. I am an associate pastor at New Life Restoration Temple. I'm also a teacher in the Boston Public School Systems and a salon owner in Hyde Park. My journey has been a lot of starts and stops. after some traumatic incidents in my past and going through a few years of a serious depression, I was finally able to just get up and move on. And so the last probably about 10 years of my life has just been a journey of discovering who I really am. It took me a very long time to get comfortable with who I am, but I've finally gotten there. And one of the things that I did when I opened a salon, we created a brand. It's a play on my name, Trailblazer. And so everything that I do, I have a t-shirt line, my ministry, any community services under the umbrella of the Trailblazer brand, which really is just about not only walking through doors, but when the doors don't open, climbing through the window to get wherever you need to go.
Ooh, you got me on that one. Climb through the window. I like that. I'm Alicia Greenaway, and I have very much a quilted life, as I was telling Monica. So I started out actually as a mechanical engineer, then I went to law school, and then I became a finance lawyer. I'm a mother of 3, and I also have been involved in music for a long time. Since I was 16 years old, I had my own band and did a lot with that. And about 7 years ago, I was put under arrest by God. That's the best way I can explain it. And Esther Generation is really has come out of that, which is a nonprofit where we use music and fashion for social justice. And so we're currently running a campaign right now called Fast for Justice out of Isaiah 58. We launched the Esther in the fall of last year, and it's been going very well. And also been involved in United Night of Worship and a lot of other things. But for Esther, that's really the baby here. We did some work on Bring Back Our Girls. We've done, we're kind of really ramping up a little bit on a new campaign for 2017-2018 that has to do with blacks in the diaspora.
Excellent. So I think you can see already that there's a theme here that the pathway to personal success is not always a straight line, and that it is completely okay, and that at each moment, right, you have to assess and adjust, and that you can plan. It's great to plan, but when things don't go your way, how are you going to recover? And so along that vein, I'd like to ask each of you if you could speak to a tough moment that you had along this journey and how you overcame it.
I'll start. I would say probably the toughest moment over the last 20 years, when I moved to Boston about 21 years ago, young bride, newly married, I experienced 3 late-term miscarriages, 96, 97, 98. And it literally catapulted me to my bed, where I really did not get up, except for on Sundays because I had to put my church face on, and I would be able to get up and put a mask on and go to church and like everything's okay, until years passed and I realized my life is wasting away. And through therapy and prayer, I was able to recover from that. But that was probably the most devastating thing that I've experienced, and it just literally stopped me in my tracks. But kind of having that moment of, am I going to just lay here and die, or am I going to get up and do something? And I chose to get up and do something. It took some time though. It took some years, but yeah.
Thank you.
I think for me a tough moment was, it's a very personal story, but it comes out of discovering I have a severe food allergy. So back in 2010, I became very ill and ended up in the hospital, and they told me I had lupus, they told me I had MS, they told me I had every disease in the book, and I went to doctor after doctor after doctor. Then they sent me to a psychiatrist. You know how they start telling you, well, it must be you then, because we can't find out what's wrong with you. And I had to go into real prayer about what my problem was, because I knew I was very ill. I couldn't tell what it was. And in the middle of all that, I had to continue to work. I had to continue to produce, continue to provide, continue to mother my children. And so I couldn't just let everything drop. So I was feeling terrible, sick to death, but unable to be sick as a woman. And if anybody's gone through that, you know what that feels like. And it really was a series of miraculous discoveries that led me to a doctor who just sitting across from me and hearing my story, he pinned it and he says, "You have a gluten allergy." And I was like, "Really?" And that was exactly my problem. I was gluten intolerant, and that saved my life. I had no idea it could be that bad. So that took me 2 years of real sickness, and gluten is in everything, if you haven't noticed. So it was a real tough.
I remember talking to you about that, and you said the best way I can describe it is that it felt like the life was seeping out of me.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Thank you. Nikki?
My biggest challenge was about 6 years ago when I was figuring out whether or not to go into business for myself. I was at, a pivotal time. My dad had passed away a year or so before, and I was just trying to figure out the balance. I thought that entrepreneurship would give me, the freedom and the lifestyle, the ability to be there for my family instead of, doing my penance 80 hours a week somewhere. But like the allure of a paycheck was really nice too, and the stability. And because, my dad passing and the aftermath of his death made me feel like, focusing on money and planning and helping people in that arena was appealing to me. It was really intimidating. I was 22 years old. I'm a young black woman trying to, break into an industry that's traditionally like made up of like old white men. So, who am I? What am I going to do? I don't have any network. And so making that decision when all the people around me who loved me were like, "No, we're scared for you. Take the paycheck." That was one of the hardest things that I've dealt with over the past couple of years. So, ultimately it was hard, but there was a lot of good that came out of it in that, there was a roller coaster over the past couple of years with my siblings, my family, and I was able to, help take care of them and be kind of like a stand-in mom, and be able to be there, which I wouldn't have been able to do had I been in the traditional 9 to 5.
Yeah, and everybody's tough is relative, right? So the other thing is when you come across these moments, don't judge your problem, right? If it is real, it is legitimate because it's real to you, no matter how many people tell you, "Oh, get over it, it's not that bad." If you feel it, it is legitimate to you. I remember waking up with this life, married to this gorgeous man, 2 children, a job that paid a lot of money, and realizing that this was not my life. And you talk about having to fight through for people saying, "I'm sorry, what now? What's the problem? You're married to a gorgeous man who comes home every night, has a good job, you have this, blah, 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 blah. I'm sorry, you want to what? Turn the apple cart upside down." But I didn't know myself anymore. And so again, I had to legitimize my own moment, right? Which is, again, don't judge it. Which leads me to relationships, right? There's no such thing as self-made. I don't care if you won the lottery, somebody sold you the ticket, right? So I want to talk about the importance of, and a lot of women understand this, but sometimes it's hard for women to get to it. So can you talk about the importance or how relationships have benefited you along your journey?
Sure. The biggest way relationships have impacted me is that, they keep you going, What ultimately made me decide to start my practice was that my fiance at the time was like super supportive, and he was like, if you can't do this, nobody can, But then along the way in building, you're right, it wasn't just me. It wasn't like I studied hard and I worked hard and I built this thing. It was, I was an ankle biter. I reached out to, everyone who had the lifestyle that I wanted or who was in my industry who were running practices like I wanted, and I just begged them to let me learn from them. Like, can I breathe your air a little bit? Can I grab coffee with you? Can I, that kind of thing. And like, that's been instrumental, like in all aspects of my life. Like, I can go through my phone or check in with people, even if you are just looking at what they're doing on social media, you can kind of get strength from that and kind of figure out like, where can I help you? Where do I need some support? And it's mutually beneficial, and it literally helps in every aspect of your life. Like, healthy relationships like contribute to so much, like, health, money, time, energy, everything.
Keyword being healthy.
Healthy, yeah,
right?
Healthy relationships.
Because as you're going along your journey, not everybody's going to be able to go, right? It's that whole reason, season, lifetime, and it doesn't mean that you have to cut the relationship off completely, but sometimes it means you have to turn the volume from 10 to 5, or from 5 to 1, or sometimes from 10 to 0, right? Depending on how much they're draining you and how much off, how far off your journey they're actually taking you. Latrelle, do you want to answer?
I think, kind of to your point, relationships, sometimes we think of them as, our spouse or significant other, friendships, but any type of interaction, there's a type of relationship, and probably in a different way for me, specifically becoming an entrepreneur taught me more about relationships than I had previously known, because I was the type that would be quick to call people friend. And what I found, I don't know if it's anybody else's experience, but the people mostly that have supported me have not been the people that I thought were going to be in my corner. And that was a difficult, hurtful thing, but then I just kind of had to realize everybody can't go with me, and I'm okay with that. But I tell people all the time, get on the train now, because when I get to where I'm going, not selling tickets.
Mine comes a little bit differently because I am what people would call an introvert. And so for me in particular, it's my relationship with God. I will tell you, particularly with respect to being led by the Holy Spirit. So when every place I've been, I've had to be a trailblazer. It was always the first woman or the first black person or whatever. And in order for me to get to where I was going, there was never a mentor. There was never anybody to tell me what the ropes or show me the ropes. And so a lot of times in the morning, I would go into prayer. And I would ask the Lord, well, who should I talk to? Or who should I see? And a name would come to mind, or a face would come to mind, or I'd walk into the room and this particular person might have it's that person. And that's how I made my way through. I mean, I'm a partner at a firm right now, and I have a big practice. And it didn't come from having a big network. It came from the Holy Spirit and me saying, who should I call today? Who should I see today? And so I really commend that to every woman, to develop that as your prime key relationship as you move forward. Because it really does, it's a fail-safe. I will tell you from a personal witness, it works. It does work.
Thank you. The other thing is, when you reach out to people, sometimes you see people and you go, oh, that person is the person that I should reach out to. And then you meet them and you want to follow the advice they give you, but it's not always the advice for you, right? So along that line, have you ever felt sort of the external pressures to mold, to become, to make decisions that were not authentic to who you were? And then how did you fight against that? I want to start with you, Alicia.
Yeah, that was a big, when Esther started, that was a big issue, because the question was, is Esther about me? Is it Alicia? Because my middle name is Esther. Is it Alicia? Or is it about all women who are Esthers? Or is it an organization? And, at the time, I was doing a project in Nashville, and it was all about you, your identity, your mark, who you are and your brand. And it felt for me like self-promotion, and it didn't feel authentic for me. And so I had to put the stop to it, and it wasn't because I didn't feel comfortable being out in front, but it was because I wanted to make sure that this was going to be true to my identity, truly, and not to an image that I was creating somehow to get people attracted to what I was doing, but really true to what God was doing. And so in that way, some of that advice, which would be typical to sell albums and books and that, it was not typical for me.
Thank you. Latrelle?
I would say probably for me, in a kind of different way, being a plus-size woman. Growing up in a time when, now it's a little bit more acceptable, but when I was growing up, it was not acceptable. And at every turn, somebody was telling me, wear black, be plain, fade into the background. But part of my brand is not about fading into the background. And so, and it wasn't just from outsiders or mentors, it was from family saying, why don't you tone it down? But that's not who I am. So then, you know, I'm sad and depressed, but everybody else is happy. So even physically, you know, people have said, do this, do that. This is what is going to help you be successful. This is what is going to open, you know, doors for you. I've done some plus size model, like website headshot modeling. Oh, if you do this. And when I did that, it didn't work out. But when I just was me, that's when I was able to get placements and on websites and different things. So just listening to my own voice and not letting anybody tell me this is what you need to do.
Absolutely. Thank you.
For me, the biggest thing, the biggest learning experience was just related to advice in every area of my life. Was just the realization that you can't take advice from people who don't have a vested interest in the outcome. So I'm saying that because the people around you, like your friends, your family, your kids, whoever, your coworkers, like those people might love you, they might care about you, they might actually really want what's best for you, but at the end of the day, whatever decisions that you make impact your life. If somebody gives you advice and you follow that advice, if the outcome is great, great. If the outcome is bad, that person still wakes up, goes to work, does their own thing. They are not impacted at all by that advice. So that's something to always keep in mind, is like what Alicia said was really inspiring about, you know, waking up and spending time in prayer every morning, but like that's not me always, you know what I mean? It's like every single time I'm struggling with something, I call my mom and I talk to her, and she's like, you should pray about it. And I'm like, I want to talk about it. Like I want to talk to somebody. I want to get some advice. I want something tangible. I want to like be related to and hear different perspectives. And it took a long time for me to understand that, like, yeah, you can take advice, you can get perspective, but at the end of the day, like the decision has to be yours, and it should be based on your research, your prayer, your like value system, and not anybody else's, because people are really quick to judge, really quick to give advice, really quick to do all of these things, but at the end of the day, you know yourself, you know your goals, and you know what's important to you, whether you can articulate them or whether you can't.
Thank you, and that's a great segue into sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I remember when I did the business plan for my company before I left corporate America, and I was so excited about it. It was my first like full-blown business plan. I used the Harvard template, you know. I was just like, yes, it was, you know, nice looking and the numbers look good. And when I say it was a mess, like I don't know if one bit of the model that I came up with worked. So I ended up fumbling through my first 2 years trying to adjust to this business model. So can you talk about a failure maybe that you've experienced and how you recovered from it? We'll start with Latrelle.
Oh, okay.
Are you still thinking?
I'm trying to narrow it down to a failure. Which one shall I talk about? Failure, okay. A failure, but not a failure. So I got a job with the Boston Public Schools. I dropped out of college when I was 21 years old against the advice of my mother, never went back to school. I got a job with BPS teaching that did not require a college degree. Worked that job for some years. It became like a little dirty secret. So the failure for me was dropping out of college. I went back to school 3 years ago, quietly, because I was embarrassed, because I had been working in the school system for a long time and I didn't have a degree. And the kids were saying, well, what's your degree and what did you major in? And I'm like, oh yeah, let's talk about something else. And so I finally just said, you know what, I'm gonna do it. And I went. And people say, oh, it's never too late. And it's never too late, but I was embarrassed. I really was. I was ashamed that I had gone for so many years and just let this kind of haunt me. And it was something that was always like right over my shoulder. So a job came available in BPS, and I couldn't get it because I didn't have a degree. And so I got my degree. Now I still don't have the job. Me and Jesus is talking about that. But I got the degree. I graduated from school, but taking that really just embarrassment It really was, of working with people every day that have not only bachelor's degrees, but master's degrees, and somebody saying, or going and speaking at conferences and young women saying, where did you go to school? Where did you graduate? And kind of always shrinking back from that. So that was something that really haunted me, and I finally just said, you know what? I just did it. It wasn't even a how did I recover. It was like, okay, it's going to be me and God. We're going to figure it out, and I did it. So,
thank you. Nikki?
Yeah. So I'm a risk taker. I make mistakes all the time. I fail every day. I can't think of one specific failure that identifies my life. I'm always like, that didn't work. I guess I'll just try something else. So the failure that I want to talk about is just like the inability to say no sometimes. I think that we're like in this culture where it's like Shonda Rhimes, the year of yes, like everyone's like, the power of yes, say yes, it's yes and. Like everyone's like, yes is this sexy thing. And I remember reading an interview, and this is so silly, but I remember reading an interview between the Olsen twins and some reporter, and the reporter said, you know, how have you guys had all this success from Full House to clothing lines to all this stuff? And one of the Olsens said, you know, we've always known that no is a full sentence. And I was like, yeah, no is a full sentence. It's not like, no, I can't do this because, like always making excuses and trying to justify like why something is or isn't right for you. And that like so deeply resonated with me that it's like, now if I'm feeling in my gut that I don't really want to do something or that something doesn't really feel right to me, that always pops into my head. It's like, no is a full sentence. I'm going to say no. I do not want to do this, and I don't have to tell you why, because it's no. Yeah. And so that was like the biggest failure for me if I like look backwards, not saying no when I wanted to because I didn't feel like I had a good enough excuse. No. Like.
Awesome. Thank you. Alicia?
Yeah, for me, my dad used to always say to me, you should know what good thing you should do and what good thing you should not do. And for a lot of us, and this was my story, was there were many things that I could do. And so I had this habit of picking the best of all the things I could do and doing that. And very often it had a lot to do with the image of it, how much money I could make doing it, how I might feel if I had it, but it wasn't really what I should have been doing, even though it was a good thing. And so when I think about a failure, people would think of it as a success. So I have a mechanical engineering degree. I said that earlier. But that's a failure for me because I was good at math. I could make a lot of money as an engineer. You see how that went, right? I got a scholarship in engineering, so I guess I should go to engineering school. And then year 2, I was like, oh, I hate this. I hate it. But I kept doing it because it was an image of something good that I could do. And at some point, in my senior year, I said, this is a good thing, but I should not be doing it. And so I ended up doing another good thing that I really should not have been doing also. And it took me a while to figure out exactly who I was. Very different than that person I was building. Very different. So I would leave people with that. Know what good thing you should be doing and what good thing you should not be doing.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Bible verse that says everything that is permissible is not beneficial. That really resonates with me. And one of my favorite quotes around failure is that failure is no indication of your ability, simply a need to adjust your strategy. Like, think about that. It doesn't mean you can't do it. And so many times we have self-defeating thoughts. I talk about mental chatter a lot, right? 85% of what happens between our ears is negative. So we've got to learn how to change the channel, and that quote helped me change the channel. It's just like whenever I fail, it is not a confirmation of things that I've been told in the past, no matter how bad you are at math or writing or relationships, whatever it is. It just means that the strategy that you're using for the outcome that you're after needs some adjusting. So I wanted to, and then you talked about the image of failing, right? So this was a question that I we hadn't talked about is this label situation, which, you know, one of my missions in life is to help people take the label off the table. Because so many times we're afraid to do something, or we don't do something because we're afraid of the labels that people are going to bestow upon us. So I guess one question I would ask you is there a label that you've ever been given in the good bucket or the bad societal bucket that you don't, it's something that you didn't want, a label that you don't agree with, that maybe you've been given? You can all answer it, or only one or two of you can answer.
Well, I might have had one. This is one when I was very young, though. It came out of discrimination, actually. But I said I was, this is all coming back to my engineering degree, right? But I said I was good in math. But I was actually labeled as retarded. And I was put in a class for kids that retarded and not good in math at all. And as a result of that, you know, I set out to prove the lady who discriminated against me wrong. That's how I became good at math. It was fighting that label. Do you understand? It was fighting that label. So that's a time when, you know, it lasted for so long in my life, that one label. So
thank you. Anybody?
Lazy.
Meanwhile, you have a company, going to school, right, okay.
And sometimes labels, even though they propel us, they also could push us into dangerous territory, which kind of goes to what you say, because then there's always that feeling of, I don't want to say no, I don't want to not do, because this is what is expected. So sometimes it could be work to the opposite extreme, which can be dangerous for your self-care and for your mental state and what you need to do. So
Absolutely, thank you.
I think everyone's been labeled, like, at some point, right? Like, we even label ourselves. Like, we try to, like, things trigger us, right? And part of labels is, like, people labeling you is more about them than it is about you, but it's one of those things where if you haven't worked through your own personal, like, back and forth about it, then it can be really frustrating. It can be really stressful. Like, if you know, don't have a problem with your weight, whether you're, like, overweight, underweight, whatever, athletic, like, if you don't have a problem with your weight and somebody calls you fat, skinny, short, chunky, whatever, you're not going to care. You're going to be like, yeah, I am. If you have a problem with it, you're going to be like, oh my God, this person's thinking about me, blah, 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 right? So I think part of, like, the label conversation is when somebody does label you and you get triggered by it, like, you get upset by it, and it either pushes you to do something good, or it pushes you to do something bad, or to get into this, like, negative downward spiral, like, just stop for a second. Like, if you're getting emotional about something that somebody said about you, it's an opportunity, is what I'm trying to say. Like,
Absolutely.
So, I mean, something that I struggled with was the whole millennial thing. Like, I'm 28, you know, I have a thriving practice, I've written a book, I speak, but it's like, at the end of the day, it's always like, oh, you're so young, oh, you're a millennial, oh, you're on your phone again, you know, that kind of thing. And at first I would be, like, so pissed off and be like, what do I have to do to prove to something to these people? And then I started thinking, like, why do I have to prove anything to them? Whatever they think about me is their issue, not my issue. It doesn't change my accomplishments. It doesn't change who I am. It doesn't change what I've done for my family, or, like, who I am as a person, or what I give back. Like, it doesn't change anything. It just is, you know?
Absolutely. And you know, we're going to segue over into social media, and this is a great one. The other day I posted a video about the spirit of offense, because we spend so much time being offended, as if, you know, it's such a self-absorbed emotion, because it suggests that the person meant it for you, to you, at you. But I always say, like, when you're offended, you got to take a look. The other person's fine. So to Nikki's point is that when you're offended, you have to say, ouch, why did that hurt so badly? What was that? Where's the discomfort? Again, which brings me back to social media, right? And I love, you know, there are lots of different schools of thought on social media. And I'm a very transparent person. I've grown into that from my experiences and the realization that my information can't hurt me, because it's my truth. And so along those lines, I post what is my truth online, and I remember some friends saying, you know, maybe you shouldn't post so many personal things about, you know, your kids or what you're thinking. And I said, the way I work is that I want my clients to know who they're working with. I want them to know what I think is funny. I want them to know what my hot buttons are. I want them to know what I care deeply about, because that actually is a vetting process for me. Because if that level of openness is not how you operate, then we probably shouldn't work together anyway. So it actually helps me out. Can you talk a little bit about your social media presence and your philosophy and how you post? Yes.
Social media is like, I have a love-hate relationship with it. I love social media for my own purposes. Like, I like staying in touch with people and seeing what everyone else is doing and posting things that are interesting to me. But as a business tool, like as something that I'm forced to use, to promote, to share, to build my business, it's really a struggle because I want it to be authentic, right? Like, I want to just like, oh, I like this, I want to post it. And if I don't want to post again for a week, I don't want to have to. So I think that what Monica said about how like being able to post authentically and being able to say like, ugh, I'm struggling today, this sucks, or to be able to say, oh, this is awesome, this is great, is really cool. And it has, even though I've been using social media mainly for personal, my clients do follow me and people reach out and message me and say, oh, I've been looking at you, I think that we should talk, I would love to work with you because I like you. I'm like, really? I just posted that political whatever yesterday that I thought that like 50 people were gonna unfriend me, and now you wanna work with me, you know? So I think that it's true, whether you are in business or whether you're just, you know, you're an employee for a company or just doing your own thing, it's really important to stay authentic and to be true to yourself in whatever you post and to not really worry about what other people think to a certain extent, because I think, yeah, it is a vetting process, and you really do, you see who your friends are, you know? You see who your tribe is. Like, you want to find your people, right? Like, that's the point. That's the point of like sharing and being able to connect, is like to find people like you, or, you know, who can add value and who you can add value to, and to just, you know.
Yeah, and who share your value system, right? There's enough for everybody. And one of the worst things as an entrepreneur is trying to be all things to all people, right? It's impossible.
As a person too.
Correct. That is correct. Also as a person.
I love social media. Well, no, let me not say that. I don't get Twitter. I just don't get it. But I love Facebook. I post a lot, but I'm very multifaceted. And so I try, for the most part, first and foremost, I try never to post anything that I think will be offensive to God. That's my pretty much rule of thumb. But I find myself in trouble often. I got in hot water not too long ago. I was doing some posts, marriage chronicles, musicians' wives. My husband's a musician. Musicians' wives, preachers' wives, different things for different people. And some people were offended, and because they thought it was about them. And is this being recorded? No, I won't say that. But anyway, so I got in some trouble. Somebody reached out to me through Facebook Messenger, and basically to me, I literally wasn't thinking about the person, but I then had to say, you have to probably do some examination. Because if I'm talking about a trifling spouse and that bothered you, you might be trifling. But I wasn't talking about you. I wasn't thinking about you. And it was actually several people that thought that it was about them that reached out to me. But then I felt bad because I never want to offend. I never do. So then what I've had to start doing is I've had to branch out and start some different pages, because maybe you can't handle me, this part of me. And I don't mean different Latrelle pages. So I have a page called Marriage Matters Raw and Uncut. So I could just say what I need to say, because I'm not trying to offend. I'm trying to help you. But sometimes, in order to be helped, there has to be an offense. Some of my biggest helps has come from people offending me, because I had to look at myself and say, let me get it together. But I think social media is huge. I also have people, my mother tells me all the time, you post too much. I said, I don't post too much, you look too much. Because if you see it, that means you're looking at it. Just keep scrolling, don't look at it. So That's just me.
Absolutely. Alicia?
So for me, I'm very different because I only post when the Spirit moves me. So I could post a lot one day, and then it's 6 months later, you might see something else. I do have, though, different pages like you for different things. So Esther has a page that is very international, a lot going on there in terms of different, mostly social justice ideas. But then, basically on my personal page, it is as I feel I need to or want to at the time. And so for me, it really is truly authentic. What you see there is really what I'm thinking at that moment. I'm not trying to keep my readership going or anything like that. So for me, it's just mostly like that, and mostly an adjunct to people I've already been dealing with in other settings. So they're logging on there and they're getting some consonance with what they might have heard me see or do in other settings.
Hi, Taisha.
Hi.
How are you? You look so beautiful.
I think I'm on. I think it's on. It's not on. Hi, everybody.
So, could you introduce yourself?
Yes.
And give sort of the 2-minute abridged version of your journey to now? And then I will ask other questions. And then I have a question of Pastor Mona and or the audience. So I know that we have a hard stop at 6:15. And I want to, how many people have questions? Questions of the panel?
I see one hand.
Okay. Okay. So I want to leave, that just gives me an idea of how much time to leave for questions. And then I am going to do a short presentation related to what we're talking about around authenticity, and then we will open it up for questions. But that gives us more time to answer a few questions. So if you could do your 2 minutes.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Taisha Crayton. I've been at Jubilee before a few times now, so I feel like this is part of my home. And I'm just going to blame the devil on this weather because my traffic was ridiculous. So please forgive me for being late, being here, but it's not because you weren't in my heart. I'm Taisha Crayton. I'm an acting director of Access and Opportunity for DCAM. I'm a wife and a mother. I also graduated from college, grew up in Boston, woo woo, Boston. But I'm also an entrepreneur, co-author of a book, and I'm also a leader and a business strategist. So my journey came from very similar places of many of stories of, poverty and wanting more from my life and growing up without, pretty much anything, with jelly in the fridge with no peanut butter. So that's pretty much how my life went. But, as we're growing up and God is making moves in your life, as you become closer to Him, you begin to understand that your journey is your journey for yourself. It is, and we are attached to people, but we are individually, fearfully and wonderfully made by God. So we are there to use that dash for the journey of our own. And because I grew up in an abusive home, a home that had an abusive stepfather. My grandfather was abusive to my grandmother. I too also traveled that journey as a young girl, had my daughter out of wedlock, beautiful girl who's about to be 24, working at NBC now. God is good. But at the same time, the journey process started because I loved her so much. I wasn't willing to allow her to go through the process that I went through. My love for her let me know that I don't want her to have the same pain that I had. I want her to know that there's opportunity, and you are the person that has the power to control your destiny with God on your side. It's not what you've been through, it's how you go through it and where you come out on the other side. And that's what I was determined to show her. And as I grew up, went to college on my own, and also married the love of my life, almost 19 years now. I also, went through process of learning how to have a husband, how to be married, because I didn't have that in my life as growing up. So I had to learn that process as well. But
growing up and going through the process, you know, we've had faults, we've had downfalls, we've had struggles, and part of our struggle was, you know, losing our jobs. We went through foreclosure. We still have our house, thank you God, but we went through foreclosure. My husband lost his car, got repossessed, but through that process, we learned what we had internally was so much more important than what we had externally, because that helped us know that you can take $21 and grow a $2 million business, because that's what we did. And when we grew that business, that journey alone, every season shows you different things about yourself. It shows you growth. It shows you opportunity if you're willing to see it and listen. You can listen to see. Amen?
Thank you. So we talked about relationships, and I just want to talk a little bit about feedback, right? Because it kind of goes along with this notion of offense. And sometimes, you know, we can be sensitive to people giving us feedback. And so I wanted to ask, how do you think you can tell sort of the difference between when you need to change versus when you need to stay the same?
I'll go first. I think that's a very personal question, and I think that everybody knows personally. There have been times when things have been brought to my attention and I've attempted to change it, and it just didn't feel right. And that's when I knew I need to change. But then there were other times that people brought things to my attention, and I was very angry and upset, and you're trying to change me. And then probably I'll usually give myself about 24 hours later where I had to say, you know what, that's probably right, accurate. I probably need to adjust. And it just kind of felt right. The other thing is, except for, you know, every now and again when God will put strangers in my path, for the most part, if you are not someone who I know means me well, I'm not generally interested, nor do I allow you to get to the point to say those things. I'll shut it down if I don't know where you stand. If I sense that it's in any way trying to hurt me, I'm not going to hear it. Of course, I'm sure we've all had experiences. You meet strangers on the street, they tell you stuff, and it's like, I know that had to be God, because they don't even know me. But when it comes to people that I know, if I know you're a friend of me, you can stay over there with that. I don't want to hear it. That's just me, though.
Thank you.
For me, we're all getting flood warnings right now. I don't know if your phones are all buzzing, but that's what it is. Everybody stay cool. We'll be all right. For me, it is if I hear it more than once from different people. Yep. So if one person tells me something, I'm like, okay, that's your opinion. But if somebody else tells me the same thing, all right, I need to change. So for me, it's the repeat that I look for.
That reminds me of in my early 20s when I first started. My company started off as a personal brand company. And, you know, I was one of those people that, you know, you go outside or to the mall and people are like, smile, sweetheart. Is it that bad? Smile. Why you look so mean? Smile. So, you know, the first 3 times I heard it, I was just like, whatever. But around the 20th time, I was just like, maybe I need to look at that. And, you know, if somebody would have asked me to describe myself, I would have said I'm warm, I'm approachable. Well, that was not the word on the street. So what I found out was that my resting face was a scowl. You know, it's the times where you're thinking about nothing or you're deeply in thought about something. And because in my business, I want people to be able to approach me and talk to me, it's actually something that I had to change, right? Because the result that I wanted, I wasn't going to get staying the same that I was. Did you have something to add?
Yeah, I think it comes down to, is the issue negatively impacting you, or is it negatively impacting other people? And so the hearing it multiple times is one thing, but like, how many times have people been called bossy? Like, I've been called bossy like more than once. You know, me and my boyfriend got in a fight not too long ago because he's like, you're so loud. Yeah, I'm loud. Like, do you know my family? Like, that's just, it is what it is. Like, I'm sorry that you're quiet. But so part of it is like, first of all, is what the person's saying opinion or a fact? Like, is it a fact that this is negative, or is this actually negative, or is it just like their perception? That's important. is this just like a difference of opinion or a difference of values, but you're actually not hurting anyone or yourself? Like, that's important to consider. And then the other factor is, like, whether you're triggered by it or not, if you are triggered by it, this is like what I mentioned earlier, like, take a look, like, introspect a little bit to figure out, like, why am I getting triggered by what this person is saying about the issue, and then find it in yourself to be able to have a conversation. Like, it was probably hard for that person to say something to you if they weren't saying it out of malice. They're taking a few minutes to say, you know, oh, okay, you know, I know that that's your perspective. Do you think that it's hurting my business? Do you think that it's hurting some, like, what are you seeing that I'm not seeing? Can you help me understand a little bit about why you're concerned for me that this is an issue? And so just talking through that, like, that would help enable you to see whether or not it's your issue or their issue, and whether you can benefit from changing or benefit from staying. So I think it's just a work in progress, and remembering that, like, there is no right answer. Like, there just isn't.
Absolutely. So I want to spend just a few minutes, is this a good time, talking about the work around authenticity that will be in line with what we talked about today, and then I'd like some closing thoughts, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So to start this, you know, I grew up as a rule follower. If I stand, can you excuse my back? Okay, thank you. I get excited when I talk about authenticity. So my journey really on this authentic work started when I was younger, as it starts for most of us, you know, the journey that we're on now, in that I was the rule follower. I was the good girl. I was the one who didn't get out of line. And whenever I got out of line, people would always kind of coax me back. You know, Monica, you know better. You know better than that. And so getting this label of good girl and conservative and smart, while those are quote unquote good labels, they also made me keep taking the easy route, right? Because when we get good labels, they feel good and we want to keep them. And so then I wouldn't necessarily take risks that I normally would have taken had I not been so conscious about getting the labels. Well, in high school, I became very good at math. I was not good at math up until that point, but in high school, I became very good at math. And because there weren't a lot of women of color in finance, the suggestion from my counselors and the adults in my world was to go into finance and accounting. So I did. I got a job in finance, and then the next step was, you know, Monica's gonna marry a handsome man. They just said it, like, what? Didn't even know it, but, you know, Monica's gonna marry, so it was just like, oh, that's the next step that I'm supposed to take. And so I kept living into the expectations of other people, chasing these labels that felt so good, until I woke up at 35-ish and realized that I didn't recognize myself or the life that I was living. So I had to take a look at a lot of different areas, and Nikki wrote a book, which is going to be for sale after this. I also wrote a book, which will also be for sale after this. But as I looked around, I said, you know, I remember the example that I give a lot is about my hair. So I've been graying since I was 21. And my hair used to be black, and it used to be down my back. And well, not quite that long, but maybe like right here. And so I remember blow drying my hair, like trying to get it straight, because straight was better, right? So I would part it in 4s, and I would blow dry the first quad, and then I pin it up, and then the second one, and the third one, then the fourth one, but then I had to go back to the first one because now I'm sweating from blow drying the fourth one because I'm hot. And then one day I remember saying, who is this for? Like, think about it. You actually are angry when you're finished. It's not even like I looked at it and said, phew, finished. Look at that. I have an attitude. And it wasn't worth it. So I cut it off. I stopped dyeing it. And I didn't get the same labels that I used to get, but I got from the same people, but I got a different set of labels from a different set of people. The difference is that this time it was authentic to me. So then I started looking at all the other areas of my life, my finances, right? How was I spending my resources? If this is what I say I want, is how I'm allocating my money in line with the things that I say I want for myself. And I realized that it wasn't. I was trying to keep up with the Joneses, right? Why? Because I had become a label chaser, which is a lot of what we do today, and social media doesn't help. You know, it's kind of like, it's a bittersweet thing to use social media. So on the one hand, if you're not completely comfortable in your journey and you're on social media, there's a tendency to start comparing your life. So I looked at all the areas. I looked at my relationships, my spirituality, my aesthetics, my emotional being. And it was interesting because my father had schizophrenia, and he left when I was 5. And I remember, you know, I've always loved him for that, because I thought it was like one of the ultimate sacrifices. He thought our lives would be tumultuous if he stayed. So I didn't have sort of like your normal daddy issues, if there is such a thing, where some of my friends may have had fathers who were in the picture, but they didn't come around much and things like that. And so they had this am I worthy, abandonment issues. So I thought I got away scot-free with no daddy issues. But then when I started discovering myself, I said, well, let's take a look at that. What I realized is that the 5-year-old Monica, who had never talked about it and healed from this, thought, somebody can love you a whole bunch and still have to make the choice to leave. So if that's true, then why fully invest love into anyone? It was so powerful to me because I realized that I had gone through my life with a bunch of disposable people. It didn't mean I didn't love them. It didn't mean I wouldn't miss them, but they could go if they wanted to, and I probably wouldn't fight for it. And so then I had to learn how to love more fully. Now, there was a risk at all this authenticity that I wanted to live, and that was losing the labels, right? The other thing that I realized is I said, where are my points of pain? Like, what is the issue? And what I realized is that I hadn't ever identified what I call my core values. Now, when you ask some people what do they value, they might say, you know, God, family, work, right? Usually in that order. I'm not talking about those kinds of things. I'm talking about your personal process, right? For instance, I was one of those people who, before I started doing this work, you know, in the Macy's, there's the first door and then there's the second door. So I was the person who would go through the first door and I would hold the door because that's polite. And the person might not say, thank you. So then I would turn around and say, oh, you're welcome. Because who doesn't mean to say thank you, right? Everybody wants to say thank you. And maybe I might not hold the second door. This is before I started doing the work. I'm a different person now. But maybe I wouldn't hold the second door. But what if the person I dropped the door on was Pastor Mona? And then when she's looking for speakers, I say, ooh, me. And she says, oh, no. Now, one of my core values is consideration. Would Pastor Mona know me as considerate? How might she know me? Rude. So a label that Pastor Mona might give me based upon her experience with me is rude. Now, I just said I valued consideration. So what I did was I let what I call the value confrontation take me outside of my values. Either you are or you aren't. Either you value it or you don't. I behave the way I do because of who I am, not because of who someone else is. So the fact that someone else doesn't say thank you doesn't move me. Why? Because I value consideration, and it doesn't matter what you value. Now, the interesting thing is you might not hold the door for that person, and they wouldn't care. Why? Because it's not a core value of theirs. And so many times when we're uncomfortable with our personal process is when we get confused, is when we get lost, is when we make decisions that are counter to who we're trying to be in this world. So what I want people to know around this authenticity is whenever you experience a vexation to your soul, somebody does something, maybe they're late, right? I had a friend who was late to everything. Efficiency and time are also values of mine. They're in my top 5. And I had a friend who would always be late. So by the time she got to my house, I was irritated. So now I'm a little short with her in the car. I'm just not the same. You know, I was ready to get to the event. I feel good about what I have on. But now I'm trying to manage my emotion or my value confrontation. So I said, again, this is when I was a little further along in the work. I said, let's do this. Hey, so-and-so, are you going to this event with me? Yes. All right, great. I'm going to leave my house at 7:30. If you want to ride together, be there at 7:30. Otherwise, I'll see you there. Boom, problem solved. I stop having the value confrontation. I don't have to dial down my relationship with this particular person, but I help the value confrontation not to happen. So as you're going through and you're having these moments of vexation, you know, think of it not as I don't like the person or that person, because our value system makes so much sense to us that we think everybody should think that way. We say things like, well, who wouldn't say thank you? That is just, they must have no home training. No, their mother told them to say thank you. They don't care. It doesn't matter to them, and you can't make it. So when you try to force people into your value system, sometimes it's temporary, and sometimes it aborts an otherwise amazing relationship if you can just understand that your value systems don't match. The last thing I will say is this whole notion of labels. So one of my campaigns is take the label off the table. And it came to me because I couldn't figure out why some people might call me stuck up and other people might call me reserved. Or some people might call me conservative and other people might call me a snob. And I'm like, but they were both there together at the same event. Like, they met me together. What is the disconnect? The disconnect is the filter by which they're using to process Monica, right? Depending on what they value, if that person valued humility and I got up on stage and said, you know, I've worked with this person, I, you know, have an undergrad degree from here, I did this, and this, somebody might say, oh my gosh, she seems so proud of herself. The other person might say, oh my gosh, she's completely self-absorbed. Now, depending on what your values are is going to determine how you label me. Here's the problem with labels. They're transient. They don't stick. Let's say if you heard that someone on this panel quit a six-figure paying job to work at a nonprofit organization where they made half. What might you call them? What are some labels? Okay, yep, stupid. What else? Generous, right? Maybe altruistic. Now, what if you found out that that person was using money from the top program to then subsidize so that they could get the salary that they had before? Now what do you call them?
Selfish.
Selfish. Yeah, what else? A thief, right? So now, are they generous or are they a thief? It depends on what you know. That's exactly right. The problem with labels is they don't stick. And the unfortunate part is that what we do is we take a situation or circumstance with a person and then we broad brush the person with a label and we stick with it. We carry it and we pass it on to other people. So what I'm asking is that, you know, the kids, I love when they say facts. You know, like instead of saying true, they say facts, you know, can I have some ice cream? But you didn't eat your spinach. Facts, okay, right? So what I want to do is stick to the facts, right? Is that instead of calling someone a hard worker, speak to the experience that you had with the person. Because if you recommend someone to me as a hard worker, and maybe you mean that they come in at 7 and they leave at 7, right? And they get everything done that you need them to do. But what if a hard worker to me is somebody who goes above and beyond and is efficient? Why? Because I value efficiency. Now, we have two different definitions, but now since she's labeled that person a hard worker, she has it in her filter, I have it in my filter. But if instead of labeling the person, no matter how good the label is, instead of labeling the person, if she would just speak to her experience of the person, then I can then take those facts and make decisions. Does that make sense? So on this authentic journey, I'm asking you to identify your values. How do you do that? Look at your pet peeves. What are the things that really tick you off? I mean, take you over the top. And there's only going to be about 5 of them, right? Like some people will say, oh, you know, if I'm in a meeting and somebody interrupts, sometimes people say, oh my God, that person disrespected you. Can you believe that? Now that happened to me in corporate America before I started doing this work. So I was like, I don't know, because I'm a recovering interrupter myself, so it didn't matter to me, right? So I was just like, I just thought they were trying to get their point across. But they kept talking and then people joined in and I was like, well, wait a minute, he's not gonna disrespect me. So now I go and approach the person, not because I care, but because other people are convincing me that somehow I was disrespected. Now, do I want to be disrespected? No, but it's not in my top 5 because it's just not a button pusher for me, and I'm not going to let it become one because other people are telling me. It is the quickest way to get lost on your journey. So identify those pet peeves. Why? Because on the other side of every pet peeve is a value. Then I would like you to stop labeling, and I would like you to start with yourself. I would like when you fail at something that you wouldn't say you're a failure or that you're stupid or that I'm so, whatever the thing is. And even on the good side, because even affirmations are good, but if you're labeling yourself in the affirmation and then you do something that doesn't meet the affirmation, now you're disappointed in yourself because you've created this big vision of something where you just stick to the facts. So I'm going to wrap here because I want to give the panelists an opportunity to wrap. Again, Nikki is selling books afterwards. I'm selling books and T-shirts. We will be here to answer questions, but I would like the panelists, if you wouldn't mind, to close on some final thoughts around whether it be authenticity or pursuing your personal journey to success. Take a minute to think about it if you need to.
I'll go so I could be done because they're going to give some good nuggets. Be unapologetically you. And I will also say that it is imperative, sometimes for those that have entrepreneur spirits or just things that you want to do, we tend to, as women, have the plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D, plan E, plan F, and sometimes we plan our way out of starting what it is that we're supposed to do because we tell ourselves all the reasons why we can't. And so a few years ago, I stopped having a plan B. I got a plan, this is it, it's going to work, and if it doesn't work, it really did work because I did it anyway. That's it.
Thank you.
I guess what I would say is be a slave liberator, because in our time, we have our people, you know, most of us here are African Americans. We've been freed from slavery for a long time, but there's still a lot of slavery in our minds, in the way we think, in the way we operate, in the way we do things. And so as you move towards your journey, recognize that what you think might be authentically you might be the authentic slavery that you went through. That there is an identity that God has for you, but you have to break the chains. And so move towards the liberation that God has for you in the mind. There's no such thing as can't. There's no such thing as can't. Take it out of your dictionary, take it out of your vocabulary. You can do anything that you can imagine is possible, and move towards it and be a slave liberator.
Thank you.
I would end with, as women of color, sometimes we have two things going for us. We either let people walk all over us, or we're a little bit too harsh with everyone because we have this block up. And I can say that because of the industry that I'm in, and as a director of access and opportunity, I find it with women, we are hard on each other as well. Try to be supportive of each other, because sometimes we understand our struggle much more than anybody else can. And although we may not always agree, we can agree on one thing, is that when we walk out of the door, nobody sees us as valuable as we see each other. So support one another.
Thank you.
I just want to close out with the thought that you have no control over how anyone else feels, so stop trying to. With the authenticity, whether it's in your interactions with people or on social media, how you do business, how you show up at work, making yourself small to try to avoid offending other people, or changing your behavior, or changing your attitude to try not to offend other people, only hinders your own success and only hinders your own impact on all the people around you. It doesn't help anyone. So in being authentic, like I know we were joking around about the different Facebook pages and that kind of thing, at the end of the day, like part of authenticity is realizing that sometimes like other people's reactions and other people's offense are their own issues, not your issue. So, you know, be who you are and don't be ashamed of it.
Thank you. 2 minutes. 2 questions. Okay. Anyone have a question? Did we answer them? There's one in the back here. Oh.
Hi, ladies. My name is Cassandra, and thank you all for coming. I was jotting down like so many notes, got a lot of great insights. My question is for you, Latrelle. So I've worked with students, and I work with in the BPS system. And so my question for you is, how do you balance working with students and also having a presence online? Because some of the things I know that I want to post sometimes, I hesitate because, you know, students, they find you and you're just like, whoa, how did you, you know, find me, and just like the balance?
Well, the first thing is you never accept students as your friend on social media. My page is private, but of course, you know, they are resourceful, and so they do still find you. As a general rule, I used to share anecdotes about students. I just don't do that. And if I do, it's something that's extremely positive. But I try to, when I'm posting something, even if it's controversial, I will ask myself, is this worth me losing my job? Am I willing? Because there's just some things I'm not going to back down from. This is how I feel, and this is what I believe. And so if I believe in it strongly enough that I'm willing to lose my job, I will post it. Otherwise, I don't. But yeah, they will find you. They will go through your pictures. So you do have to be careful when you work with school-age children, because it can come back to bite you. You also have to know the policy of BPS when it comes to social media presence for educators and support staff.
Thank you.
Hi, ladies. So my question, or what advice would you have for women of color who work in a predominantly white business, I guess, you know? Like, and people always asking you, oh, you're the only black girl, and you're doing it, but how do you overcome that, working in a place where you're the only black woman?
Do you mind? So before I left my company full-time, in 2006, I worked for a commercial real estate firm. And in 2006, which was hard to believe, I was the first black female commercial broker in Massachusetts. And so I was it, right, across the table. And what I would say is, when I say get out of your comfort zone, I mean engage people on a human level. Because our experiences, you will find, are much more common than they are different. And when you start to get to know people and you know their children, you know their names, you know the things they're dealing with, there's a trust that starts to be built where people are more open to then learning of who you are. And fortunately or unfortunately, we usually have to go first because, you know, there's more opportunity, I guess, for us. But I would say reach out to people, have coffee, stop by their desk and just say, hey, you know, we've never had a chance to talk. Do you have a few minutes? Where did you grow up? How did you get to the company? How are you finding it? Even the people you think you don't like, just engage them and just see if there's, you know, sometimes you find out that that exterior is because of an experience they had or some, you know, and sometimes the things about race end up coming out and you get to, not that you're out to be an educator, but you just have an opportunity to change perception. So engagement is what I would say. Anybody else?
Yeah, I would add to that because that's been my experience through my entire working career. Like Monica, I was the first black partner in my firm and the only one actually, to my knowledge. But I think at the end of the day, everyone has something that they talk about. So the first thing is be a listener. I work with all men, so I'm also different in that way. They talk about what television show they watched and the sports games. So I became conversant in TV shows and sports games, and then there was a dialogue. And once they realized they could talk to me, then we branched out into a lot of other areas. So you have to find that commonality. There's something
That's called intersectionality. You might hear that in feminism talk. It's the idea that you can find different stratas of society where there is always going to be a common denominator. So don't think of yourself as two-dimensional, black woman. There's a whole lot of other things you like. I mean, I see how you're dressed. There might be some people who are dressed like that who are, you know, an Asian male. So you have something to connect with them on. So find that common denominator and connect with them there. And then what you'll find is through that, the relationships get built and they will stop seeing your color after a while.
Thank you.
I would also say don't let it alienate you. Like, that's been my whole life too, and I think that it's almost an opportunity. Like, it's an advantage to be the only one in anything, right? Like, to stand out. Just be kind. Don't take anything personally. Yeah, people might touch your hair. They might say stupid things. Just, who cares, you know? Be kind, talk to them, and just.
Hair. They will.
Yeah, you don't have to let them know.
They will touch your hair. Yeah, you don't have to let them. But it's just, it is what it is, and it has nothing to do with you. And it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity.
I say the same thing because I'm the only African American woman director in 560 employees at DCAM. And in the room, there's me, a Caucasian woman, and then the rest are men. So sometimes it is uncomfortable because there are some things that come out in rooms that they forget that you're in there because you become one of them. So they forget you're in the room and go, well, I meant it this way. And as my sister said, don't ever take it personal or internalize it. Take it as an opportunity to educate and as an opportunity to share on what could be better and how they could handle what, I mean, it is an advantage because sometimes in my instance, there's some things that they don't understand that they're asking questions of, and they come up with their own scenarios of what could happen. And I'm like, no, that does not happen at a cookout. This is what happens at a cookout. You need ribs and potato salad, and this is a real cookout. So, you know, it's an opportunity to educate as well.
Well, I could sit here for another hour, but I know we can't. So we are going to close. Thank you so very much for your time. I've enjoyed this immensely. I think most of us will be here for a few minutes at least outside. Again, please come and visit our table, and God bless you. God bless.